Welcome to The Shuby Show, where sports, movies, TV shows, technology, history, and more come to life. Now, please be seated and get ready for some more never-ending nonsense with yours truly, Shuby.
Hello, everybody, and welcome to The Shuby Show. I'm your host, Carson Schubert, and today we have on the show Do-Hyoung Park, who is the Minnesota Twins beat reporter for MLB.com. And Do-Hyoung, I have to ask you right away. I have to guess, I should say, which Korea you were born in. I'm going to guess South Korea.
Yeah, I think that's a pretty safe guess, and one that paid off you this time around. Also, I will say, nice job on the name pronunciation. I think of all of the shows or podcasts or radio or TV or whatever I've done, you nailed it. You're the only one that's nailed it the first time.
Well, I have to say I did look up some of your videos to just to see once to make sure, because I didn't want to embarrass myself on the podcast by pronouncing it wrong. So
that's a level of research. That's a level of research that I respect. We're off to a great start right now.
All right, awesome, man. I appreciate that. So, man, I guess just my thoughts are, first of all, talk a little bit about your career here in a moment. First of all, I guess before we do that, just talk a little bit about how you got interested in baseball and then how you ended up getting this Twins beat writing job.
You know, as far as the interest in baseball goes, it's funny because so I was born in Korea, and my folks didn't bring me to the United States until I was 4. And essentially what my parents were big baseball fans back in Korea, so in the Seoul area, where they went to college and just kind of lived their young adult lives, and I came around. And as it just happens, they were fans of a team called the Twins in the Korean Baseball League too, the LG Twins, especially my dad, who still remains to this day a diehard LG Twins fan. And so when we as a family moved to Minneapolis, they were just like, wow, this is super fortunate from going from the Twins to the Twins. And my parents thought that was just the funniest thing ever. But as soon as we got to the United States, honestly, like my folks watched baseball, but they weren't so much into live sports and all that. So I didn't actually get into baseball really until I was maybe like 8 or 9, where I was starting to get a little older and understand the game. And we also didn't have cable in my household growing up. So Fox Sports North and getting those broadcasts wasn't necessarily a thing either. So baseball I was kind of a relatively late bloomer in baseball, so to speak. But, I grew up in Minneapolis, so went to games at the old Metrodome, and the Torrey Hunter, Justin Morneau, Michael Kadire, Joe Mauer, Prime. Watched Johan pitch growing up. My first Twins game, actually, I think was a Boof Bonser start. It was one of those. It was one of those game 2 of the seasons, and I think I went to two Boof Bonser day after opening day starts in a row to start my Metrodome career, if I remember right. Because, like I said, my folks weren't all that into live baseball. But yeah, so that's the origin story of how I got into baseball. And as far as how I actually got into working in baseball is concerned, it actually wasn't really on my radar until, I don't even know if I can say late in college. It might even be right after I graduated college, just because throughout, high school and college, not only was it not kind of the direction that I thought my academic interests and my career would orient themselves in, it was also a matter of I didn't necessarily think that even if I got into the baseball field that getting to this point would be possible. And so it took a lot of kind of fortunate circumstances coming together and the timing being right on a lot of different things for me to end up here. And I think that's something that I'm really acutely aware of, and I'm glad to, and I'm just really appreciative of every day. So essentially how that kind of came about was, so I didn't study anything even remotely close to journalism or writing or anything like that in college. And just my freshman year, I want to say, it was in the winter. I was like, I'm in college, I'm in California, I'm 4,000 miles away from home. I should probably do something just crazy that I would not have done anything anywhere else. So I did 2 things. I auditioned for a steel drum band, and I got to like the last stage and didn't get it. And I also joined the student newspaper. And I was like, I like watching sports. I like watching baseball. I like watching the Vikings. I'll try that out. Started on women's swimming and diving, I think, out there, and then slowly worked my way up to baseball and then football. And I just loved it. We had a great football team, man. We went to 3 Rose Bowls in my time there, so that just kind of helped really kind of expose me to just kind of a bigger stage of what sports reporting was like. And I really enjoyed that alongside what I was doing academically, obviously. So after my senior year, I just kind of happened upon, when I was looking for internships, of a posting for the MLB.com internship. I can't even remember what it was. I don't even know if I remember thinking it was a real internship or not, because it was on, like, I think the sportsjournalist.com forum, which, if you haven't been to that, it doesn't look really all that legit, frankly. It's just one of those it's just one of those kind of forum looking deals from like the mid 2000s. And so I just like sent all my clips off in a manila envelope to that, got a call like a month later after I'd totally forgotten about it, being like, hey, you're one of the finalists. We need you to do this test. And I was like, okay, sure. And I did like the writing test. It was, you had to write about one of the games of the World Series from the previous season, just like write a game story. And then I got the call saying that I was going to be the Twins intern, and that just kind of snowballed afterwards into I got myself work freelancing with MLB.com, and then my editors were kind enough to approach me when a spot opened on the news desk, and I was on the news desk for a while, and then the Twins beat happened to open up a few months later, and it just all kind of happened in a big blur, and I'm still not really sure how it happened, and I'm still kind of trying to figure out how it did and kind of grasping all that. But again, like I said, just appreciate what it took to get me here every day.
Absolutely. That is really awesome. I definitely appreciate a lot of these beat writers and even broadcasters, which is kind of more of the field that I'm in, but I've also done some writing as well. I appreciate those broadcasters and writers that have basically started at the bottom and all the way to the top. Is pretty awesome. Just going to say one thing on those Rose Bowls. We're not going to talk about the Iowa-Stanford game.
Oh, I can talk your head about that off every day. That was actually the year you're talking about broadcasting. I was on the broadcasting team for our student radio that year. And I remember just thinking Iowa had a great shot going to that Rose Bowl. They like brought out everybody everybody drove out and all their like Winnebagos and everything to Pasadena. And I was looking around and I was talking to my buddies in Iowa media, and I was like, I think you guys got a shot at this. That defense is scary. And then I remember Christian McCaffrey going 75 yards from scrimmage on the first play, and my co-broadcasters and I looked at each other and we were just like, this isn't going to be close. It was the most absurd thing I'd ever seen. We were just looking at each other like, what?
Yeah, right when that happened, I think every Iowa fan was like, yeah, this is not going to go well.
Yeah, just the oh no moment. Yeah, for us it was like an oh yes moment, but you could just see that side of the stadium just go, what is going on? What have we gotten ourselves into?
Yep, exactly. Well, man, that's really awesome to hear how you got to where you are now, and yeah, absolutely makes you very grateful for the position that you do have now, I'm sure. And so, yeah, well, I guess progress in your career a little bit. You kind of pretty much touched on anything else, or everything, really, but is there anything else that you did before you really got into baseball that you enjoyed doing or maybe didn't enjoy doing?
Yeah, so I don't know if there's anything that I didn't really enjoy doing. I think so in college, like I said, I had my course of study just wasn't anything to do with baseball. It was kind of a grind, and frankly, I enjoy thinking kind of technically and computationally and analytically. That's just kind of how I was wired growing up in both college and high school. And that's, like data and statistics and that sort of thing is something that I really enjoy, especially on kind of the visualization side. And that's something that I haven't been able to do as much since I got into this line of work. But frankly, I can't really complain. And so far as soon as I stepped into the world of student media in college, whether it was on the writing side or on the editing side or on the broadcasting side, and later on we got more into the podcasting and multimedia journalism side as well. I mean, just the experience of being in a newsroom, being at a sporting event, shoving a mic into an athlete or into a coach's face, just being able to ask them to pour out their stories or their opinions to me. I just fell in love with that right away. And, regardless of everything else that I had enjoyed or had thought about doing at the time, when this opportunity opened up, I think it was just one of those things where I couldn't possibly say no, even though there are a lot of other things in the world and in the academic sphere that really do drive me as well.
Absolutely. That's awesome. I'm glad you've had multiple experiences, and I think that's kind of key also in media, is not to just go from writing and continue writing. I think it's key to also get like broadcasting experience or experience in other areas of the industry, because you never know where you might end up someday.
Oh, definitely. And I think the thing I've taken away from at least making my way into this field is, especially on the MLB news desk, which is kind of how I got my in, it's such a multifaceted thing. There was a lot of editing going on. There was a lot of writing going on. There's a lot of researching going on. And just the more things you can get your hands on and the more things that you have experience and comfort doing, it can only benefit you in the long run. And especially in this job, even as a beat reporter, there's obviously the more traditional reporting and the writing skills that come into play, but also so much of it is hopping on podcasts when they need me, or being able to go on MLB Network when they need me. And frankly, the TV element of it is something that I had never done before. And it's also something that I wished either in broadcast journalism in college or finding opportunities elsewhere. That's an area I wish I had gotten a lot more experience in as well, because honestly, regardless of what role you're working in, my feeling early on in my career, at least, is that once you're kind of in and once you have that first foothold, whether it's in broadcast or print or anything like that, navigating your way through the world of sports media becomes so much easier after that. Just however you can find your way in and however you can find a foothold, whether that's broadcast, print, or just some combination of everything.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. One question as we get into Twins talk here, I'm sure maybe some other Twins fan, at least one other one, has to have thought, is there any way that you are related to the former Twin, Do-Hyoung Park?
It's really funny. My fantasy baseball name in the league that I do with my high school friends is actually not related to Do-Hyoung. It started out as not related to Do-Hyoung, and then it turned into R.I.P. Do-Hyoung, frowny face. So no, we're not. It's actually really funny, and this is something that I get asked about by my friends kind of in jest, because like my name is Do-Hyoung, and then there's Do-Hyoung, and then there's Chan-ho, and there's just like, do like Korean people always need to have like a name that rhymes with Do or Ho, like in baseball? And it's just a really, really funny coincidence. And it was also an even better coincidence that the year of Do-Hyoung in 2016 was my intern year, so I got to spend some time around him. There's some. It was just really, really cool to, as a minority in Minnesota, which, there aren't really many of us in sports to begin with, and much less so in Minnesota. It was cool to be able to see somebody of his stature come over to like I said, just like the Midwest, and just kind of try to forge his career path out here, and to watch him be embraced by the Twins community. Obviously didn't work out, but I'm hoping to actually catch up with him in Korea this fall and kind of write I don't want to call it a post-mortem, but more of like a, where is he now, what happened, and what does he think of this story this off season? Because I go visit my folks in Seoul every year.
Absolutely. I would definitely look forward to reading that story. That would be a lot of fun to see what he's up to now. And, of course, you guys having that similar background, definitely something to relate to there is really awesome as well. But I just thought I better ask just in case you are, but it's still a good story you had behind that too. So
you got to cover your bases. I respect it.
So as we continue to talk Twins, the Minnesota Twins, by many people's standards, are having an overachieving season. And what they, at least for what people thought coming into this season after a very disappointing 2018 season, the Twins have been on a roll, still in first place in the division, only 5.5 game lead right now, but they've got a chance to really get off to a good start in the rest of the season after the All-Star break here, and they play Cleveland coming up here too. So it's looking like the Twins could have a good chance of maybe making some more distance between the Indians if they can win some games. But I just got to ask you, Do-Hyoung, what are your thoughts on this Twins team after maybe you have seen some of the Twins teams in the past few years? What has made this team so different? Obviously, there's some new faces in there. Rocco's first year as manager, and the Falvey and Levine era has maybe finally officially started. What is your opinion or thoughts on this Twins team?
Yeah, so the first thing I want to address, first of all, is kind of what you're saying in the intro to this about the Twins maybe a little overachieving. And I don't know if that's a fair way to characterize it necessarily, because a lot of the core players on this roster, right, the Jorge Polanco's, the Eddie Rosarios, Max Kepler, Jose Barrios, Buxton, those guys were all around for the playoff run in 2017 too, when the Twins were bounced in that crazy wild card game at Yankee Stadium, which undoubtedly triggered some bad memories of some playoff series against the Yankees back in the day too. But the gist of the matter is that the core is generally the same, and I think what a lot of people around the Twins saw is that, well, that core led a playoff charge in 2017, and last season, even with injuries, Jorge Polanco's suspension, Buxton and Sano underperforming pretty much the whole season, even with all that going on, they still treaded water until the midpoint of the season. Even after they sold off all of their depth pieces, played really well down the stretch, and they finished under 500, but it wasn't a lost season by any means. And I think coming into this season, it was more of the sense of, well, we know that at least in theory, the pieces are in place for this team to be a playoff contender. Now let's see if they can prove it, especially with breakout seasons or bounce back seasons from Buxton and Sano, to go with what they were hoping to be continued progressions from Polanco and Kepler and a lot of these other guys, and especially Barrios plays a big factor into that as well. And I think the Twins were in a somewhat of a wait-and-see mode going into the season, where they were like, well, we know that in theory they can contend, let's see them prove it, and they've absolutely done that. And this was kind of the best-case scenario for the Twins, where Jorge Polanco went supernova, as did Max Kepler. Mitch Garver is one of the most pleasant second-year surprises in all of baseball. They've got Buxton and Sano now, especially in recent days with Sano playing at the level that they were hoping for them to play to anchor this lineup. And so a lot is going right for this Twins team. Even Michael Pineda and Martin Perez are coming through as kind of the depth starters that the Twins had hoped that they would be coming in too. So now it's just a matter of adding toward the final stretch. And speaking to so I don't necessarily know if this comes as a surprise. It's obviously it takes a lot of people aback because we thought it was Cleveland's division to lose, myself included, coming into this season. But I think there was also a sense that if everything clicked for the Twins, and especially their young core as it's done this year, this was certainly within the realm of possibility. And now we have transcended possibility and gone into probability. So now speaking to the other half of what's kind of different this year, I think, being in year 2 of the Falvey-Levine regime, as you said, one of the things that especially stands out on the pitching side is the availability of information and the communication of that information. So Wes Johnson and Jeremy Hefner, the 2 pitching coaches, are just information gurus. Every time I speak to either Wes or Hef, I find myself smarter than when I entered that conversation. Like, Wes is just absolutely phenomenal where it comes to biomechanics and just kind of the physical side of pitching. And Hef coming over from an advanced scouting role is just fantastic when it comes to, pitch usage, and as is Wes. And, coming together with all those minds, I think one of the things was that they wanted to bring all that information closer to home. And so having guys like Wes and Hef in there interacting with the guys every day with their knowledge and comfort of information has made a huge difference in how kind of information is propagated from like the R&D folks in the front office to the manager's office, to the coaches, to the players, for example. And I think just kind of bringing in guys like Wes and Hef that have supreme comfort with all that information and also in communicating it to the guys has really helped on the pitching side in particular this season with a lot of the strides that you see these guys making this season.
Yeah, it's been, I think, definitely a combination of that. And, you heard all kinds of good things about Wes Johnson coming in from the college ranks. Of course, Arkansas having a lot of success for many years as a baseball team at the college level. But then it was like, well, does this guy know how to do it at the major league level as a coach, or is it different than college? But it seems like there hasn't been much of a difference for Wes Johnson so far. I think he's definitely done a really good job. And as you mentioned, Jeremy Hefner as well, they've both done a very good job of just, I think, communicating to the players and helping them make the right changes to be able to be successful for the Minnesota Twins.
Right, absolutely. And yeah, like you said, the transition thing from college to the transition element from college to the pro game for Wes was also an interesting thing too, because Wes is, whether he was at Dallas Baptist or Mississippi State or where he finished his college career at the University of Arkansas, he was always way ahead of the game when it came to this, I don't want to call it new age, but this relatively new to the pro game idea of using these pitch tracking systems like the Rapsodo or like the Rapsodo machines to track kind of the pitch, to track pitch characteristics, or the Edgertronic high-speed cameras and that sort of thing that show pitchers where the ball is coming off of their fingers in super slow motion to let them kind of research and develop what's going on themselves, and they can see visually what's going on with their pitches. That sort of thing, in a way, the college game and Wes's side of the college game was even ahead of a lot of pro teams in that sense. So I think it's funny because the pro game has such a wider audience and such a wider scope than the college game does, but in a lot of the kind of research ways in baseball, Wes and his college and a lot of folks in college were ahead of the curve in that sense. So it's funny in that the transition up to a bigger stage is obviously daunting, but he also brought so much new information and comfort with that information to the table that I think helped smooth that transition a lot when the guys realized, wow, this guy's bringing in a lot of really cool information and this is helping me out a lot.
Yeah, and that has to make you wonder, did the Twins find a gem, or were other teams just late to the party, or did they know about this guy and they just didn't want to give him a chance? Or I really would be interested to know why teams prior to the Twins did not give this guy a chance for all of his success that he had, even as like a bullpen coach or even minor league coach. But the Twins gave him a chance right away with the pitching coach duties, and he has been a very, very big addition to this Minnesota Twins pitching staff.
Right, and that's something where, and I don't want to speak as an expert because I've just entered the baseball field, but you hear about baseball just being kind of, it's a game with a lot of inertia and a lot of nods to the past, and that's kind of changing right now, and where we're seeing this transition over just the last even 2 or 3 years of kind of a step forward into more modern thinking. And Derek Falvey especially has been kind of on the forefront of that, where you read about him going to, like pitching camps or like development camps or like speaking to college coaches at conventions around the country and that sort of thing while he was with the Indians. So that's also an area where he had a lot of familiarity with some of these guys when he came into the Twins organization and brought some of those ideas into the fold.
Yeah, absolutely. I think it's definitely a combined effort, team effort, as they say, between Falvey and Levine, and of course Rocco, and of course the now famous Wes Johnson for the Twins. I guess kind of moving with the division, we kind of talked a little bit about the Indians briefly, about how they were predicted to run away with this division. I kind of did mention to a couple of people that I thought that Cleveland would maybe take a step back because they did lose some of those bullpen pieces. Michael Brantley was gone, and some of their lineup was not quite as powerful, it seemed, as the past. I mean, obviously, you still had the core guys returning in Lindor and Ramirez, and then they traded back for Santana. Obviously, the rest of the division hasn't had much to say, but Cleveland, they've kind of had a really big run here in the month of June and now starting in July, and it's all of a sudden looking like this could be a race here yet.
That's what everybody's wondering right now, right? Oscar Mercado is having a heck of a rookie season for Cleveland right now. He's a really hyped prospect coming up, and he's really delivered on that hype in his first taste of the big league. Zach Plesac has shown flashes of brilliance in his experience in the majors. Shane Bieber was an all-star this year. A lot of these guys coming up and contributing to the Indians. But here's what I'll say, and you see a lot of folks on Twitter, social media. I lurk around the Twins subreddit. Everybody's freaking out that the 11-game lead has gone down to 5.5. But I think it's also a matter of keeping perspective in that you look at it's a couple things. You look at some of the teams that the Indians have played in this recent stretch. They've caught up, most recently having just crushed a schedule consisting of Detroit, Texas, Detroit, Kansas City, Baltimore, Kansas City, and then 2 against Cincinnati coming into the break. Not exactly world beaters out there. Cincinnati and Texas are solid teams. And also consider that the Twins at various points in these last, 2.5 weeks, had injuries to their top 6 outfielders. Their top 6, Rosario, Buxton, Kepler, Astudillo, Adrianza, Marwin, all sidelined for various periods of time. Like, I remember looking around and being like, there is literally an outfield right there of Luis Arraez, Jake Cave, and Williams Astudillo. And I remember being like, well, if that doesn't show you what the Twins team is going through, I don't know what else will. And they still played 500 baseball. Everybody's acting like the world is ending, where the Twins lost their top 6 outfield options at various points and played 500 baseball through a stretch of pretty tough teams. I think Tampa was in there. Oakland was obviously in there. Texas, they won the series going into the break. So, frankly, especially with this team looking to be a lot more healed coming out of the All-Star break, I'm less worried because I think what a lot of the Twins have been doing this year is sustainable, and I do anticipate them adding, especially as far as pitching is concerned, before July 31st comes. And like Jake Odorizzi and Kyle Gibson were both saying before the All-Star break to me, if you asked us before the season, if we were going to be up 5.5 at the All-Star break, if we would be happy with that, absolutely. And I think a lot of that scorching hot May kind of skewed the perspective of a lot of these Twins fans. And I know it's hard to blame them. I grew up in Minnesota as a Minnesota sports fan myself. But at the same time, my call to the masses is please, please, please keep perspective, because it's still a 5.5 game lead, and that's still pretty formidable.
Absolutely. We will take that, and I guarantee the Twins will take it as long as we can keep that lead going into the rest of the season. That is their hope. And you just touched on it a little bit, and we're going to touch on it a little more here. Trade possibilities for the Twins. We've all heard the rumors of Madison Bumgarner and Will Smith possibly being looked at in a trade with the Twins, and we've also heard Ken Giles and Kirby Yates, also a couple of closers that have been having very good seasons for the Blue Jays and the Padres, respectively. And what are your thoughts on some of those guys, and what are your thoughts on how many players do you think the Twins actually need? Do you think they need a couple pitchers for sure, and then maybe add a outfield defense type of guy on the bench, or maybe even need 3 pitchers, a starter, and a couple of relievers? What are your thoughts on this trade market for the Twins?
Well, I think I would be surprised if the Twins didn't come out the other side with at least one high-end reliever in tow. I think that's kind of my expectation at this point. You saw that they were willing to go 2 years on Kimbrel, and you know that they're not sitting on their hands. They know that this is an area that needs to be addressed, especially with Hildy still doing his thing in AAA, and Blake Parker still trying to get his feel for his splitter. And I think the bullpen in particular was kind of, I said at the start of this segment, a wait-and-see thing for the Twins, where they're like, well, we want our young core to prove it before we're going to aggressively add items. So I think, this is just speculation on my part, but I wouldn't be surprised to see the Twins come out of this with a starter and 2 relievers. I think that's, I think especially for a controllable starter like Trevor Bauer or Marcus Stroman or even Matthew Boyd, I think if the right deal were to materialize, I think the Twins obviously stockpiled a lot of intriguing prospects last season when they sold at the trade deadline. So there's certainly movable pieces to be had. And I think this team has shown enough in the first half, winning the season series against the Astros, hitting the crap out of the ball. Starting rotation's been pretty darn solid all season, but I don't think they would hesitate to add and maybe sell off 1 or 2 top prospects to do that. And especially with an eye toward not just this season, where we know they obviously need 1 or 2 back-end bullpen arms that will really help, not just in August and September, but obviously in the playoffs as well, but also a controllable starter. I get nervous about the idea of a rental starter, especially one like Bumgarner, where the name value is going to inflate whatever the ask is going to be to a certain extent, not just the name value, but also the postseason resume, regardless of whether it was 6 years ago or not. It's still a factor in there. The one thing I worry about a rental is that the Twins also do have rotation needs next season. The Twins, three of their guys, Pineda, Gibson, and Oda Rizzi, are all due for free agency next year. So I think team control is a big element that's going to come into play as well, and that's where a guy like Stroman might come in, where Stroman is controllable. Or the same thing with Trevor Bauer if the Indians do end up deciding to go in that direction. So, I think as far as relievers come, the names you mentioned are obviously going to be in play, like the Tony Watsons or Will Smith from San Francisco. Ken Giles could be in play. Shane Green might be an option if the Tigers decide to go that way as well. So there's a lot of, I think the relief names are all out there. I'm more intrigued to see, personally, if the Twins are going to make a move for a controllable starter or not. Because like I said, I fully expect this team to move for back-end relief help. But as far as starting goes, I think they're reaching around feelers right now. But I wouldn't be surprised to see that go either way.
And would you expect that if the Twins are going to give up a lot of prospects to possibly get Madison Bumgarner, would you expect that they are going to ask the Giants if he would verbally agree to a contract extension before coming to Minnesota, or would you say that probably is not a possibility?
Well, that's tricky as well, and I haven't been around baseball long enough to know if that violates some CBA or collusion or some agreement or something like that. I honestly am not comfortable enough to say, but that's also something where, like you've seen Mad Bum in the public sphere. He's I don't know about this. I don't know if opinionated. He's strong-willed. He is strong-willed, and he knows what he wants of himself. He's been pitching out in San Francisco for a while. And regardless of what happens, I'll say I would guess that's something that they would do a good job of gauging especially if they needed to trade a top prospect away. Before they would make a move for something like that. I'm sure they would at least have some sense of knowledge of what that plan would be, and that would dictate how that decision would unfold.
Absolutely. One name that's maybe a little bit under the radar because of his lack of success over the last couple of years, but he's kind of come on the radar again. Sonny Gray for the Reds has had some postseason experience, not a ton, but maybe he could be another name that the Twins maybe look at from Cincinnati.
Right, and that's if the Reds are selling at all, right? That NL Central is a cluster right now with, I don't even know how many games it is that separates first and last place. I think I read something like first and last place in the NL Central. That split is less than first and second place in any other division in baseball right now. And Sonny Gray, fantastic story this year. More than a strikeout per inning on average. Going back to some of that early career Oakland form, obviously. But like I think I think he'd be, again, another solid get for a Twins rotation. And obviously, like I said, the team control aspect comes into play with that as well, where, the one thing that might make the Twins balk is that he's controllable through 2022. And the salary is, I think, a little over $10 million for each of those seasons. So that's a big investment to make in a guy like that. And again, that's if the Reds are willing to sell at all at this trade deadline, which is not a foregone conclusion. So I think that's also a factor where we've seen kind of Falvey and Levine, especially as far as pitchers go. They've kind of shied away, at least in the first 2 years, of making longer term, more expensive investments in pitchers, regardless of whether they're starters or relievers. And that's something where, Sonny Gray specifically speaking to him, he's 29 right now. He's going to be on the wrong side of 30 going into next season. They still be on the hook for over $30 million of him heading into 2022. And so I think that's also a factor that they balance, because again, I think if you're going to make a longer-term multi-year lucrative offer to a pitcher, I would think they would want him to be on kind of the younger side, or less of kind of like a high risk. I don't know if I want to characterize Sonny Gray as high risk, but he's having one good year after whatever happened last season. So I think that's something that I would be a little more cautious about personally.
Right. Absolutely. It'll be interesting to see what the Minnesota Twins do here at the trade deadline. Obviously, we still have a few weeks before that. Hopefully, the Twins maybe even consider making some moves, and I know they've been taking feelers, as you have said, for possible trades coming up before the trade deadline. But important series for the Twins coming up with the Indians here with the division not that far away from the Indians' grasp, only 5.5 games, as we mentioned. But the Twins have got some guys coming back, which you mentioned as well, and that is a good sign, especially as you head into the last part of the season. And, I guess that's pretty much all I had for you today, DoHyoung, and I just really appreciate you coming on the show today, and it's been a lot of fun talking to you.
Yeah, for sure. I've had a lot of fun, too. I like I was saying before we started recording, thanks for dragging me out of bed this morning. I needed something to do that. So I'm glad to have you in my life this morning for that as well.
Absolutely. I'll be happy to drag you out of bed anytime.
You can do that however. Yeah, I had a ton of fun, too. Thanks a lot for all the good questions and for taking your time to chat today, too. I really appreciate that.
Absolutely, and I hope that we can eventually do another podcast sometime. Maybe if the Twins end up in the playoffs, we'll maybe have to talk about that series, or down in the off season possibly as well. So it would be a lot of fun to do that again.
Yeah, I would have a blast doing that. Like I said, it's been a lot of fun. You ask good questions, good banter. What more can I ask for?
Yeah, that's right. That's right. Well, again, our guest today on the Shuby Show, Do-Hyoung Park, the Minnesota Twins beat reporter for MLB.com, and he is from South Korea. So just to clear that up for everybody.
Yeah, I think I introduced the doubt with my Twitter bio, but I appreciate you clearing that up.
Now you don't have to guess, everybody. I guessed for you. So... well, again, appreciate you coming on the show, and we'll have to have you on again sometime. Really appreciate it.
Thanks a lot, Carson. Till next time.
You bet. And that is going to do it for the Shuby Show. We'll be back again next time with another episode. Until then, see you later.
Thanks for listening to The Shuby Show. We hope you mildly enjoyed yourself with more never-ending nonsense with yours truly. For more nonsense, go to the website, theschubyshow.com. Get the show on iTunes, Google Play, YouTube, Stitcher, and TuneIn Radio. Until next time, Skol.